What is happening? It's Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcast. And today I'm super excited to be joined by Tracy Stallings. Did I say it right? I always screw up last names, but I feel like your name's fairly easy, right?
Yeah.
Tracy is an Instagram referral. So thanks to Bert from Instagram for referring Tracy to come on the show. And we've chatted a couple of times and now excited to have Tracy on the show. And of course, thanks to Vertical Helicast for making the Helicopter Podcasts possible. Tracy, what is happening?
Not much. I'm working nights and it's been slow, so I've been enjoying my days.
Oh man, I love that. I don't miss working nights. Last week, I went to Hillsborough Heli Academy, and I was asked to come and meet with their students and do like a little Q&A and talk about my experiences and everything. And it was really neat. I had to kind of tone down my hatred for flying nights a little bit. You know, all these kids, I'm like, who wants to fly air medical? You know, there's 50 hands that go up and I'm like, oh man. So I had to explain that for me, air medical was difficult because of the nights. I think I've cried about that enough on this show. So I'm sure that listeners love hearing all about that. But Tracy, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. I love, thanks to Bert again for the referral. It's always nice the podcast is cool for multiple reasons. It's become a cool platform for our listeners. But it's been a pretty awesome deal for me where I get to meet and connect with new people. And I think the helicopter world can feel really small because it is, but yeah. I feel like I'm in a position now where I'm getting to meet like everyone within that industry. And then we talk and you know this person that I know and we all know the same people. And it's just kind of the neat part of this industry. So, you know, I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about your story, your background, because I know I would call it slightly untraditional, right?
Maybe most helicopter pilot backgrounds are a little untraditional, unless you're like born into a family of helicopter pilots.
That's true. I was not. We were actually, before we got on, we were just talking about parents, and my parents are like the anti-flyers. You know, my dad was like a, 4 or 5 Bloody Mary guy before he gets on the airplane. But he's obsessed. It's kind of funny. Actually, he discovered Facebook recently, and so we'll go over to dinner and he'll just be on his phone like this, watching airplane videos, which is weird and hilarious all at once. But tell us a little bit more about you, how you got started into helicopters, when you got started in helicopters, and we'll take it from there.
All right. A brief overview. I grew up between Nevada and Alaska. And when you grow up in Alaska, you want to get out of Alaska very quickly after high school. So that got me out real quick.
I have to pause real fast. Why is that? Because everyone I talk to is like, because I've never been to Alaska. And so I say I've never been to Hawaii, I've never been to Alaska. And people are like, you suck. And when I hear about Alaska, it's like Alaska is amazing. And so
amazing.
Why is it just because it's like a little, what makes you say that? I'm just curious.
Well, I grew up in Fairbanks in the last part of schooling, and that's where I graduated. And Fairbanks is amazing in the summer. The sun's not really going down, but for like an hour, still light outside all the time in the summer. But in the winter, you get a half an hour sunlight, and it was 40 below zero. So that is something you want to get away from if you're not like a steady income and you just get out of high school. You're like, peace, I'm out. And It's a little behind the times. When I left, the music was a little behind the times. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much down in the lower 48. So I did some stops. I lived in Boston, and San Francisco was so much fun, and Tahoe. And then I moved over to Hawaii, and that Hawaii is when I got into helicopters. So it's been a fun journey.
-40 in an hour of lights. I can. Okay, I
Half an
can.
hour.
So I'm a fair weather Alaska fan then, I guess. So I'll go during the summer.
Go in May. Go in May.
May.
Yeah.
May's the nice time. What about like July, August? Is that nice?
Sometimes the weather starts moving in. I guess up in the interior it's nice, but down around the coastal region, July and August kind of get rainy again. So May and June are the
Really?
nice months down in southeast. But
Okay,
there's
good
so
to know.
much to see and do. You just get used to doing things in the rain, and yeah, it's a fun place to be. But
Yeah, well, it's a bit of
in
a
the last,
helicopter mecca as well. So I'm like surprised that one way or the other I've never been there.
yeah,
Obviously, our Lee, our mutual friend. Well, you're a really good friend. I kind of know her. By the way, come on the podcast, please.
we talked about that.
I'm always watching her Instagram and seeing all the amazing things that she's doing up in Alaska and all the
Hmm.
cool videos and things. So it definitely,
But yeah, when you're working
definitely,
commercially up there, though, you're working nonstop from the minute the helicopters can start flying from heli ski to training in May to October, November until the snow falls and temps get to. You're just working. So you're not playing as much. We definitely, when we lived in Alaska, my husband and I flying in Juneau, there wasn't a lot of camping. There wasn't a lot of playing. It was just you work like crazy until the jobs are done and then it's winter and then you try to go to Hawaii for a week.
yeah,
So
that makes sense. So you move out of Alaska. So some oats, I'm assuming Tahoe, San Francisco. It
that was
sounds pretty
fun.
fun.
It
Uh,
was.
uh, Capped off by Hawaii, which again, I've never been to Hawaii, which is ridiculous, but that's maybe a
Cool.
different story for a different podcast. But um, what what was it? Was it? Did you go to Hawaii with these intentions for flying?
Oh
How did the whole
no,
flying start? Because that's kind of the interesting
man.
part to me, whereas this was never really in um, your
Scope.
your scope of what you were actually going to do in life.
Yeah. So I was living in Tahoe when I was 22 and just to get out of San Francisco. The city was a lot and it was a lot of fun, but I needed to go decompress up in Tahoe for a year. And that's where I met Lee Coates. She was my trainer at Sunnyside Restaurant and she was training me one day and we ended up becoming friends there. And about a year later, you really starve in Lake Tahoe in the spring and the fall. So unless you have a career set, it's very challenging to live there. So I went over to Hawaii to do massage school and I was going to be a massage therapist. And then I became a painter over there and started painting houses. And then we moved over when I was doing massage school and painting houses. And one night she's like, "Hey, you got to come down to this barbecue. There's a helicopter pilot down here." We didn't even know there was a helicopter school on the island. So I went down. We met the guy. His name was Dave Learned, and he ended up becoming my instructor, one of my instructors. And we just totally like fell in love with the idea. Lee and I had wanderlust so bad that we were like, we're going to become helicopter babes and travel the world and be amazing. And she just went for the gusto, and I had to pay off my massage school loan. My parents were like, "No, you just finished massage school. You're not doing helicopters." And then we did it. And we ended up living with my parents in Alaska when she was flying up there. And when she'd come back from her shift, she'd bring them beer and pizza. And my dad was finally like, "Hey, this helicopter thing's pretty cool. Maybe you should do it." And so it all just kind of came around that way. And they were really helpful and very supportive, getting me through the training at Mauna Loa over there in Hawaii. And it was
Just
just
to
a
give a
great
little
time.
time frame, what year was that? Like, hey, come meet this guy with a helicopter.
I think I was 29 when I started my actual training. So it was probably like 2005 or six that Lee
Okay.
had me come down and meet Dave.
And again, like 29, you're not like old, but that's still
Oh,
late. That's like, to me, it's like a different. I was teaching by 20, right? So
uh-huh.
there's like but that's like, I'm always surprised because for me it's like I came out of the womb wanting to be a pilot. Helicopter pilot, not necessarily. That was kind of that was not necessarily my scope, but it ended
Uh-huh.
up working out, and I'm glad
Yeah.
that it did. But I'm always fascinated to meet people that like didn't necessarily have that in their plan. Was aviation ever a thing? I mean, before the age of
No.
29, when you thought of a helicopter, what did you think about? Like, can you even pull yourself back to that point?
Well, growing up in Alaska, you sit in the back of all these really awesome planes that your friends' parents have, and you go out hunting and fishing and spend a day out flying in an Alaska range. And I never thought in a million years I'd be a pilot. So this was really like a really good drunken idea with Lee that one night at a barbecue that really just came to fruit. And with the support and of the family and the friends. And then once you become a pilot, especially helicopter, there's something that gets in your blood and you can't live without doing it. And I know someday I'll have to retire, hopefully a long time from now, but I just can't imagine not flying, not having that. Can you imagine sitting in an office? Can you imagine that sitting in an office?
Sadly, I can. Sadly, I can.
We go to corporate in Salt Lake and I see cubicles. I'm like, these poor people. Oh my God.
Yeah, no, cube life for sure. It's, I kind of go back and forth. The long-term plan is I will have a helicopter. That's my plan. I want a helicopter. Nothing, maybe a 44, maybe a 206, something like that within the next few years, because one of the things is, it's kind of sucks not to fly full time anymore.
Mhm.
There was things that I loved about, obviously flying, and for me, there's a couple points of flying a helicopter, like picking a helicopter off the ground and coming in and flying your approach. Like, to me, like, those are like moments that's so magical. Like, it's just, there's nothing, you can't explain it to anyone that doesn't quite understand it.
Or
And when
finding that little spot in the trees to like, can I get in there? Yes, I totally got that. Nailed it.
The off airport landings, air medical, things like that, shutting down a highway, landing in the middle of nowhere, and 3 a.m. with under MVG. I mean, all that stuff to me is like badass stuff. But I'm talking about like just like this. Oh, helicopters are amazing, and so I do miss it. So I'm hoping at some point I can have a helicopter and do helicopter things more often. But luckily, I'm still in the helicopter business, so I do get to fly, but just not as much. But yeah, no, I totally hear you on that. So I mean, I obviously know it wasn't immediate. You guys, I guess, what's the time frame between a drunken idea of becoming helicopter pilots because you met someone, flying helicopters, to actually like enrolling at Mauna Loa and doing flight training to become a professional helicopter pilot?
So Lee went through her training, did her teaching, and was working various jobs for like Paradise Helicopter, and then went up to Jayhawk in Alaska. So it probably was 2 or 3 years after that I drove an idea where I finally was able to get the loan, get so far in school, and then have parents help me with the rest of it. I don't know how it was done without their help. So that took me through the rest of flight training. And then I ended up over at Blue Sky Aviation in California, where I taught in wine country, which was totally amazing after 10 years in Hawaii, seeing palm trees, volcanoes. It was so nice to be back on the mainland. And that's actually where I met my husband, John, too, was at that flight school. And yeah, flying in Sierra Nevada in wine country by Paso Robles was just so killer being on the islands. It's nice to get back on the mainland.
What is it like training in Hawaii? Because I've always felt like it would be a little odd, like especially like the idea of cross countries and things like that. Like, what do you feel like? What are the good and the bad? If there's someone that might be listening to the show, and I've only heard great things about Mauna Loa personally, but what are some of like the just the training pros and cons of Hawaii?
Well, Mauna Loa was awesome when I was going there, and I'm sure it's still a really amazing school. It's just been a long time. My instructors were really cool. Jesse Henson, Ethan Sheen, they were so much fun. And at that point, we had a lot more freedom probably than they do now. But the winds, you get really good in the winds. I was terrified of the winds. I was out of trim all the time, and one of my instructors' hair's permanently like on a side mohawk because he's like, my hair is like this because you're out of trim all the time. I don't know how much that's changed over the years, but
It's funny.
It was really funny.
That reminds me, I had an instructor, Mike Morris, great guy. I went through instructors a lot. I was always kind of moving around, and I was like, what's the story? The Three Little Bears or whatever. I just had to find my perfect, And Mike Morris was that guy. He was an incredible dude. And I don't know if you remember, at least at Hillsborough, we had a fuel stick to measure the fuel quantity in the R-22, and it would live down by the instructor's feet. And he would grab that stick and he would hit me with it when I would fly out of trim, and it'd get better. I still think I'm a little bit of an out of trim flyer, to be honest. Like
I do it on purpose now so I can see better.
yeah. Well, sorry to interrupt. So you're getting good at winds.
Oh,
What are some of the other good and bads of Hawaii?
the landing areas were really kind of eclectic that you could find over there. You get in the valleys and fly in the different winds coming off the coast there. That was pretty aggressive. And then you've got the bigger helicopters like Paradise and Blue Hawaiian were buzzing around. So you get used to communication. The Big Island was good for cross country because we had plenty of space, and flying over to Oahu across the islands, I was like puckering the whole time because I am afraid of going in the water in an R-22. I just don't think you're coming back from that. That's just me, though.
I'm afraid of just going in the water in general, especially like the middle of the ocean. Like that's not my forte. What kind of crossing length is that?
Oh gosh, I can't remember, but you're in there for a couple hours and we put the doors on, which wasn't normal. Usually we flew without the doors on. And I had this big goofy instructor who had as much enthusiasm as I did. But I'd be like, Jesse, I just need 2 minutes to wrap my head around the fact we're over open seas right now. I need you to be quiet. And like, give me 20 seconds. Like, isn't this awesome? Wow.
I'm not a big fan. I've never been a fan of crossing water in a helicopter personally. I've had a couple experiences, but not like that. I mean, we're talking about like, man, I'm trying to think. Maybe the longest body of water I've crossed was probably, you're going to laugh. It's like probably 4 miles. It's probably like going from, up to like, God, what is that? Vashon Island, crossing over to Boeing Field up in Seattle. Like that, like that big strait that feels really big and scary. Yeah, but yeah, you can
Even
totally glide to Boeing Field and land on the runway. Yeah.
even Yakutat Bay in Alaska, like that, I think is like 16 miles maybe. And when you're coming back from heli ski or from contract work and you're going over that bay, and that's where your fuel stop is. So you need that fuel stop just on the other side of the bay. You're like, ooh, nothing goes wrong right here.
I know, well, especially in Alaska, like the water's cold, and I mean, I'm sure you guys had some protocols and things, and uh, hopefully of being rescued in time. But yeah, I mean that all sounds really not fun, actually.
Alaska was fun. Hawaii was great. Hawaii was a good spot to go to school and learn, and I had a lot of fun there. I liked where
Producer,
it over in California too, though. That was a fun school.
yeah, producer Zach can attest. I just don't love. I like being in the water, but I don't love water animals.
Oh no.
Uh, of all sorts, not just sharks. Or I just don't like it. Like if I'm in the water, and I do like a cold plunge in the morning, and I do it in the river down by my house here in the Deschutes. And my biggest issue with that is not the cold water. It's like, man, what if there's an otter that comes and mauls me? And then Zach is like, no, otters don't do that. But then one of our other sales guys, John, sent me a story recently of some ladies getting mauled by otters in Yosemite. So just the idea of flying over big portions of water kind of scared me because I'm just not into sea animals.
Man, seeing the tiger sharks in the air in Hawaii, that
Ugh.
really made me question what areas I went into the water at.
Yeah, seriously. Well, I want to keep talking about your training and your experiences and kind of what you're up to now. But real fast, we're just going to hear from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. Joined by Tracy Stallings. Tracy, where are you? Where are you at again? Where are you based now?
I'm in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, and it's one of my favorite places I've ever lived and worked.
Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Where is that?
That is on in the Rocky Mountains on I-70, going closer to the west side. We're about an hour away from Grand Junction in Colorado. And it's hot springs, amusement park, really cool town built in between two canyons, so it can't get very big.
Really?
And any direction you can have mountain passes and camping and playing and hot springs.
Man, that's incredible. And do your parents live over there too?
Yeah, after 30 years in Alaska, my parents moved down from Alaska to be with us, but I really think it was the grandkid. So
It was definitely
close to us.
definitely the grandkids. Do you like living close to the parents? I'm torn. I like living. I live 5 minutes from my mom and dad. It's mostly good, mostly.
I love it. After being in Hawaii for so long and my parents in Alaska, I just like the family being close, especially as they get older. And my brother, after 20 years in Hawaii, moved over to Colorado. So now I have my family here to help with our 6-year-old boy who gets to spend time with them. And the flying here is next to Alaska. It's my favorite flying I've ever done. So it's just we've got a unicorn position here. We work from home. We live right next to the hospital. One does day, one does night. Kid goes to school across the street from the hospital. And then we get our week off to go play.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. I want to talk more about that real quick, though. I do want to backtrack. So you end up in California working as a flight instructor, I'm assuming, doing some other things. You meet your husband. Obviously, he's a helicopter guy, too.
Uh-huh.
That's nice.
It
I
is.
like. We've had a couple. I had another gal. I think her name was Christine. She was with Columbia, and her husband both fly at Columbia, and they're on the same hitch. Sounds like you guys are on the same hitch, so that's really nice. Producer Zach and I have some friends, Esther and Corey. They're a helicopter couple, so that's pretty neat. I guess talking about that, because I'm sure there's other people that are listening that might be in a relationship with someone that they're going to school with, or husband wife flying team, and maybe not in the same similar position where it's so awesome. What is it? Was it kind of like this idea, like, okay, we're in this same industry, like we have to find a job that we can both work together? Like I imagine like stepbrothers. Like, do you show up to the interview together?
No, actually, I was one of John's instructors, so I was a little bit further ahead of him when, like, going up to Alaska. I was there first. Coming down to Classic, I was here first. But they kind of knew Alaska was great because they brought him in. They're like, yeah, more helicopter pilots, and having a couple is fun, especially when the dynamic is good and pretty constructive. And then coming down here, Classic really took a gamble hiring us down here in Colorado. As I think I was the first female rotor pilot that they hired, and we were definitely the first couple. And we were the first people, I think, that they hired that they didn't have recommendations for other people or references. And so they're like, man, I hope this works out. And I think it's worked out really well. It started with John and I here at Classic, and then Esther and Corey. I was talking to Esther, and I'm like, you gotta come over here. Oh, I know Esther.
What?
I've known her since my first hitch here. And
What?
so when they opened the base in Cortez, I was like, you got to do this, because there's so many companies that won't let husband and wife teams work together. And Classic was a very family company, and they're like, let's see if this works. And it does. We got a happy family. They're going nowhere.
That's so cool. I didn't know you knew Esther and Corey.
Interesting.
Shout out to Esther and Corey. What's up? Are they at Classic? I haven't talked to them in a bit.
Yeah, they're in Cortez when that base was opening, because they were both working for Air Methods at Care Flight, and then Corey was down in Taos. And you can't have a family, you can't have time together if you guys are, apart on different hitches all the time. And if now they are doing what we're doing, where they work from home and they're on the same hitch, and I think they continued hiring more couples too, because it's worked so well for the company.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's like, from a company standpoint, if you could put a husband and wife on the same hitch, you're gonna stick around. Like,
Yeah.
that's it's a little bit of like golden handcuffs in a way, because it's like, you don't want to go anywhere, because that's kind of a hard schedule to be, especially if you have kids, and it sounds like you guys do. So, that's really neat. And I think but Dan Bentley, do you know Dan Bentley?
Dan Bentley was here in Glenwood. Yeah. Well, no, he wasn't here in Glenwood. He was up in Steamboat and he just moved down to Montrose to care flying. He is a character. He's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dan and I went to flight school together. We worked at Maverick together. And I actually had him on the podcast. It's been probably about a year. So I haven't really caught up with him. But yeah, Dan's a great guy. He raised falcon, or he like captured a falcon. Did you know that? Like he captured a falcon from the wild, like held it against its will for months and trained it and did all this cool thing and then let it go. I mean, what a weird dude.
That's Dan's thing. He's very smart. He's got a unique set of interests.
Yeah, yeah, he's a super smart guy. And I remember that he was at Classic. So, so you end up flying in Alaska. What were you doing up there?
Oh my gosh. So I got hired by North Star Trucking, and this is probably one of my favorites. The company up there is amazing. It's a smaller company than Temsco and Coastal, and my boss, Jason Colbeth, he's just one of my best friends still. I love that guy to death. And Cooper Carruthers was the one that hired me, and he was kind of taking a chance because they didn't want a girl for the dynamics of the crew house. But he's like, wow, I don't care what anybody wants. I'm hiring this girl. And he trained me. He was the first one to train me with the A-Star. And you just never forget that training. He was so much fun. And if anybody knows Cooper, he's kind of wild and he's a little crazy, but he just made the training so much fun. So working in Alaska, starting with tours, and then eventually getting into heli ski, which was challenging and so much fun and so rewarding, hanging out with the guides and some of the clientele. And then contract work took me all over Alaska in different parts, which was really neat to see it as an adult instead of a young girl in high school, driving around to go hunting with her dad. So it was just really neat to see the dynamics of the state and how it had changed over the years that I was gone. And that helicopter, the A-Star, especially the D3, cool. That thing's amazing.
Yeah, hot rod. I have like no 125 experience, no A-Star experience at all, really, which is a bummer. I flew the H130, B4 and T2. T2 very similar power, same engine, but I don't think it's as awesome, just because of the airframe. But I got to give you some A-Star time. We just actually had apparently the A-Star is celebrating 50 years.
Oh.
And so we actually had the oh man, why is it blanking? My brain's not working. Friday, having issues, haven't had any coffee yet. He's the project manager or the team lead for Airbus for the A-Star, the 125, and pretty cool to hear about just 50. What an incredible aircraft, right? 50 years of awesomeness, right? Now leading to the 125. You mentioned
Dragonfly. It just, especially the D3E, that thing it wants to fly. It's so fast. It wants to fall if you kick it out of trim. Like it
landed on Everest. I mean, it's an incredible machine.
Yeah.
You mentioned this a couple of times, so I'm going to bring it up. Classic first female pilot up at North Star.
They had
rotor. North Star getting hired, even though maybe there was a push not to hire you because you're a girl. How much of navigating the industry has been a little more challenging just based on gender?
Females definitely will feel what is it? Leave my words carefully here. Females will definitely feel the resistance to getting into aviation. And the ones that are in it currently and have been here before me, we really have to toe the line of having it together and like trying to pave the way for the people behind us, because there are still guys in the industry that are like, they don't want female heli ski pilots because they can't bring the NAR. And then at the end of the season, they're like, you did a great job. That was awesome. Are you coming back? Or even just pilots in general, like some of the older ones that hadn't been around a lot of females, but a lot of those guys are retiring. So I'd say like people like Lee Coates, paved the way before me. And there's a lot of other women ahead of me that have done that. And it's really important, I don't know, for all of us pilots, but really like if you screw it up as a female, you're making all the females behind you look bad.
Oh man, you're putting a lot of pressure, Tracy.
There should be a lot of pressure because it's a lot of money. There's a lot of risk. You got to have your stuff together and don't screw around. Don't ruin it for the rest of us. So it's definitely a double standard in the industry. Just have fun, be a good pilot, try not to make a mess.
Yeah. I mean, this should be for any boy or girl, really. But I get it. Like, look, the industry is male dominated. You can't argue that, right?
I think we're
uh,
5% of the industry is female, maybe.
what was that?
I think it's 5% of the industry is female. I don't know
Well,
if
I
that.
think that's like five. I think I've heard like maybe like even lower than that. And that's like all of aviation. Like I don't know what the actual helicopter percentage is, but I would almost think that it's maybe less. Maybe it's I know it's growing, right?
Yeah.
There's more women getting involved. I think actually I've talked about it before, but I think it's shows like this or other YouTube channels, Instagram, Facebook, Lee, someone like Lee that shoots amazing content in helicopters and is a woman and is hopefully inspiring other young women to get involved. I think that's the thing, right? Like it's easy for a little boy because everyone that we've ever met that's a pilot is a dude. So it's like, okay, yeah, dudes can be pilots. It makes total sense. So I can definitely see it, being challenging. And the funny part is I've worked with a lot of female pilots. Never once did I have like any bad experience other than like they're just like working with any other pilot, right? Like I don't like some of the guy pilots I flew with. Same with the lady pilots, but it's like nothing's changed. It's just all kind of the same. So
Yeah.
I can definitely see that being probably a little bit more challenging. What was it about the interviews at Classic and North Star that the people were like, "Hey, we want to give this girl a shot"?
Um, the interview with North Star, I was super persistent, and I had a buddy that had worked up there that was really putting a good word in for me, and I really appreciated that. And at Classic, I just wrote the chief pilot an email and was like, "This is my husband and I situation and our experience in Alaska. We have a kid that we never see, and we're ready to transition out of Alaska to normal schedule." John was away for 5 months on his last contract, and I was like, "Babe, I rented the house and sold everything. Meet us in Colorado when you're done in the interior of Alaska." He's like, "Oh my gosh, okay." So we knew we were making that change, but with helicopters, it's all about the timing, and you have to make yourself work with the timing of the industry, really.
Totally.
So, and with Classic, I went down and met the chief pilot, Adam West, and he's such a cool guy. He's the most down to earth, easygoing guy. And then our director of ops, Corey Hill, they're like two of the best people. And after meeting Adam, I went and checked out a couple bases. I did like a 4-day road trip of 1,200 miles and checked out a handful of Classic bases. Got back up to Alaska. The next day, they're helping me sling dog camp, having me help sling dog camp. And then they sent me out on a fire contract. I'm like, this is why I'm leaving, because I'm gone all the time. And then I talked to Adam when I was on that fire contract, and he's like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "Everybody loves working with you. Like, what do I have to do? I'm in." And it just, when you go to all the bases and they say the same thing about the management, they're like, "This is the best management you can ever ask for." You're like, "Oh, I want to be part of that family." And it has been amazing since we got here. They've been so supportive and so helpful. And just, I mean, I can't rave enough about those guys. And then the training down here too. Owen Park did my training for the Bell 407, and he is, I don't know, those people that you get an opportunity to train with that you'll never be as good at, that they're just a badass pilot. Like, you eat that up and that training stays with you forever. And you just are so grateful when you're out there doing the maneuvers that they're teaching you. So I just feel grateful all around. We're pretty damn lucky.
Yeah, it's awesome. I don't know a ton about Classic, but I've had buddies, Dan, now you. Sounds like Esther and Corey. I think
Mhm.
Eli Malloy was at Classic too, and
Yeah, he's in Moab.
Moab. Uh, I don't think he's there anymore, but um, yeah, it seems. I mean, is it all 407 right now?
Well, we've mostly everything's 407. We've got the only 429 here in Glenwood. So
Oh,
really,
you're rocking the 429. Look at you.
man, we love the helicopter. It's really good for medevac.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, I have some questions about the 429. Are you flying IFR with the 429?
No, not. It's all VFR because in the mountains, if you're doing IFR in these mountains, most likely you're in icing conditions, and that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, not what you want to be in. One of the things that I've heard about the 429 is apparently there's a certification issue when they certified it, and I think it's like 500 pounds.
Mhm.
Essentially, the FAA was like, "Hey, Bell, I know that you said that it can carry this much, but we're actually going to derate it down 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Does that affect the mission for air medical at all?
No, not at all. Because unlike Alaska, there's a lot more fuel stops down here. And I think in the beginning, when we first got the 429 here, we were like, we're fuel stops. Let's be super conservative. And now at this point, we've got everything, down. We've been doing it for so long, for the last 4.5 years here, that that helicopter is so sweet to fly. It's so smooth in the wind and the altitude. And she is a beast. Like, she is just a beast. And the fuel tanks are all along the bottom. So it opens up the whole center of the helicopter for medical treatment. And you got a co-pilot seat for a passenger, which is really nice. If we're transporting a kid, we can bring a parent with us. Or
Totally.
Search and rescue, throw some cute little old ladies in there that got lost on a hiking trail and their dog. So
you guys also do some search and rescue at Classic?
We do a lot of search and rescue. I'd say that's what they train us the most for, is to like really go out and get those.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. If you're listening to the podcasts and you want to do air medical with search and rescue, consider Classic, because most air medical companies will actually have it clearly in their GOM and op specs that they do not do search and rescue.
Search and rescue in the Rockies is amazing, and Utah's right next door, and we get to do stuff over there. It's part of our job.
Man, you're living the dream, Tracy. You're living the dream. Absolutely incredible. So how long have you been at Classic now then?
This will be 5 years in July. We're going nowhere.
Yeah. Like I said, handcuffs. No, it's a good situation. And your husband is enjoying it, likes it there as well.
Yeah. I think he wishes that we flew a lot more. It's like taking that summer of flying in Alaska and spreading it out over a year here.
Yeah.
Which is fun still. I mean, you still get to do so much stuff. You get a lot more recreating, actually. And the flying is really cool. And I'd say it's a lot safer down here because there's so many roads and there's so much access. You're not stuck out in the middle of a big glacier somewhere.
I've always kind of told people, I think I even talked about this when I was at the Heli Academy recently. It's like in my opinion, there's two paths of flying helicopters. You have their blue collar path, which I include like utility, firefighting, like the fun stuff, power line, or like the white collar path. Because I kind of think of it as like flying an airline almost, like the air medical, tours, corporate, charter. I feel like that's like the two paths, right? And I have a ton of buddies that are like career blue collar pilot guys. And I have guys like myself that have never done any of that and just kind of went straight to doing white collar, whether it's tours, corporate, air medical. Now, obviously, with Classic, you guys are getting to do some more search and rescue, which I'm going to throw on the blue collar side. But by and large, it's an air medical company flying from A to B with patients, sometimes landing off airport, but also I'm sure doing a lot of inter-facility transfers and things like that. Is it hard to come from this world to that world?
Yeah, it was. Actually, yeah, it was. There's a lot of freedom in Alaska, but time is money up there. So they're just like, you go from A to B as fast and efficiently and safely as you possibly can, because time is money on those helis. Down here with the white collar stuff, it's just, we do so many PRs. We do so many free flights. We give 2 hours free of search and rescue. So there's times when we go find a lost hiker, pick him up and drop him off at his campsite, and it's free for everybody involved except for the helicopter company. But
yeah,
there's a lot of inter-facility stuff, and there's more bases like Moab that have, inter-facility stuff, but a lot more search and rescue. And then there's bases that are primarily inter-facility. But I think we're pretty lucky with being in the Rockies, the flat tops, all the recreation. We got our hunting season, our hiking season, and our snowmobile stuff. So we're out there in the field a lot, getting people and bringing them back. Sometimes there's recovery stuff too, but it's just nice to be a support for the community while people are playing.
Totally. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about that. I'm kind of curious to hear about the search and rescue side, but real fast, we'll take a sponsor call.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry, From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Hey, we're back to the helicopter podcast. And during the commercial break, Tracy was just saying that she would maybe prefer having a bald head.
Yes.
You know, it's funny that women, like, it's not really a thing, I guess. Like, maybe people should just start doing it. If more women would just shave their head, then it would be maybe we need like a famous female to shave their head and rock it. And then
what if it's not a nice bald head though? Some people
that's true. And there's actually, I mean, I've always said that, like, it's God gave everyone hair and everyone else, he gave a nice shaped head. And so I'm very thankful that I have a nice shaped head. The truth about it is I like being bald because it's easy, low maintenance. I do shave every day, except I didn't do it today. So I have a little fuzz growing, but that's like a little bit of a pain in the butt, but not too bad, obviously. But for men, I feel like hair is like the one thing that like we can kind of use to express, right? You can gel your hair, you can do whatever you want with your hair, right? And I think it does kind of, give you different characters and whatnot. So I've often thought like I would like having hair. And I've actually had a couple buddies that recently went to Turkey because Turkey is the leading people for hair transplant, and it's way cheaper. So one day on the podcast, I might just have hair. Who knows? My wife thinks that being bald would be great too. So it's just one of those things, right? Maybe the grass isn't always greener, but search and rescue, I'm kind of fascinated. I guess from a very layman's terms, you go and you search and then you rescue, but there has to be like, you can't just like, I guess I've flown a 44 before. There was some really bad flooding in Texas one time and a lot of people drowned and died. And we were looking for people. I didn't know what I was doing though, right? I was just using the helicopter to fly down rivers and we had people spotting, but what kind of training goes into it, and what kind of emphasis do you have to put on the safety of doing search and rescue?
Well, they were very heavy with the training. OB was super heavy with our training in Classic for search and rescue when I started with the 407, because just being realistic, that's a lot of what we do with Classic. So the training's big, picking out your spots and making sure you're getting in and out the safest way. And then when you're out there doing stuff, there's different ways of search and rescue where somebody either sets off their GPS, which is awesome. They're in reach, which I recommend everybody having. And also your Apple phone has the emergency, which I've actually been called by a couple of times this last winter when people didn't have service. So I'm super impressed with that. But if you're out doing anything, you should have some sort of, signal to be able to get help with, whether it's rattlesnake bite, a twisted knee, something like that. But you can either go out, maybe it's word of mouth. Hey, we have a hunter in part of this group that went for a walk and we can't find them. So they launch us for that. Law enforcement will get involved and be like, somebody swam across the river and was trying to swim back and we haven't seen him since halfway. So especially with the 429 helicopter and with some of the 407s, you can get one of those law enforcement or search and rescue people that know the area well into the helicopter with you to help look in these areas. And then sometimes you're on your own. I was doing a search and rescue over one of our reservoirs out here on Mother's Day, looking for somebody that wasn't wearing a life jacket that fell off of a paddle board, which seems to be a thing. And like, it's super disheartening when you know that you're at a point where it's a recovery and not a rescue anymore. And it's super exciting when you see a lost hunter out there that's frozen his butt off overnight, but is still alive and you can land and pick him up, or somebody that's been in an avalanche. So there's a lot of cool aspects of search and rescue.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it would be, to me, search and rescue is like, air medical is different all the time, right? You're doing different things, but at some point there's a lot of the same, right? Like when I flew air medical, there's a lot of the same hospitals. I was at a hospital. I took people from that hospital to one of the 5 or 6 better hospitals in San Antonio. And then occasionally you get something kind of offbeat. I feel like search and rescue is something that would be like really, it's different all the time. It would be
very eclectic. Yeah.
And talk about like legit, like obviously air medical, you're helping save someone's life as well. But search and rescue, like someone's, stuck in the wilderness, like you are their saving grace, right? Like that's just a crazy, crazy deal. What about like animal attacks and things like that? Does that happen in Colorado, like bears and things?
No, not where we're at. I did have a moose come walking up towards our helicopter one night when we went and got two little old ladies that had got lost on the trail. And coming from Alaska and knowing it was rut season, I was very concerned. And then I realized later that I landed on the trail he was using that was going around the lake we were at. I was like, probably 10,000 feet. I'm like, oh, that guy could have just swiped his antlers and hit part of my helicopter.
Oh, that would have been bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
moose are giant too. I had no idea, really.
Great, and they can't see very well, but no animal stuff really. Just mostly people hurting themselves or doing something stupid. A lot of car accidents, a lot of snowmobile stuff in the wintertime. That's pretty unfortunate, but we can usually get to people pretty quick if the weather is okay. So, yeah.
I went snowmobiling. I've gone snowmobiling twice. I do ski patrol, so I use the snowmobile for ski patrol, but that's like to go slow and not very fun. But I've gone like recreational snowmobiling now twice, and I really enjoy it. But every time I'm on it, I'm like, I am so close to breaking my neck right now. Like, this is so dangerous,
It's
and
the flat light where they roll into a ditch that they can't see, and then it being their leg that gets broken or their back or something or their hips.
well, and they're just real unstable too. It's weird. Like they're very top heavy. It's weird. Producer Zach can attest. I'm usually quite a cautious guy. Put me on a snowmobile, I start going nuts for whatever reason. It's like doesn't make any sense. So it's not really in my DNA, but yeah, I could definitely see snowmobiles being a thing. But yeah, I mean that's a neat part about flying helicopters. I talk about this all the time. Is there's a lot of people that hate helicopters, right? I feel like most of my friends or family maybe they don't hate them, but like they're like, oh, I'm never going in a helicopter or Kobe or
Well, they need
whatever. What was that?
they need a ride or somebody they love.
Until they really need you, right? And it's like not only with just air medical, but just so much of our world, so much of our country is ran because of helicopters, and that could slowly kind of start changing as technology evolves and everything. But so much of what we do is around helicopters, and so many lives are impacted positively from helicopters. Helicopters have killed a lot of people too, but they've saved far more, far more. I don't know that for sure, but there's obviously they're saving people every single day,
There's far more. I walk around this town and people stop me in the grocery store at the restaurants and like, you flew me, or you flew my daughter, or you flew my dad.
That's cool.
It's super cool. Or you flew me, I had cancer. I'm like, you look so much better right now.
Glad you're alive.
I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad it's really cool to see people back up on their feet again and moving around. You're like, all right.
Yeah, it's funny. I never had that. I worked in, I mean, what's the population of that town that you're in there?
Maybe 5,000 or something. Maybe 6.
Oh, yeah. So like the towns that I was working in were like a few hundred, like teeny little Texas towns. And so no one ever came back and said thanks or anything, darn it. But there was one time I picked up a dude that it was actually the only airplane crash that I ever went to was he was spraying ag, hit a wire, and I'm doing my circle, and I'm like, ooh, I don't, I think they're gonna cancel this because this crash looks pretty bad, and they didn't. We land, and they throw this dude in the helicopter, and he's very, very hurt and kind of unrecognizable. The airplane was incinerated. I mean, it was completely just gone, charcoal. And months and months go by, and one night we get called for a motorcycle accident. We meet and we're at the hospital. The ambulance is going to take the patient to the hospital. We're going to take him from there. And this whole group of people come, because they hear that their relative was in an accident, and I think they had been drinking. It was a chaotic situation, and one of the guys kind of looked eerily familiar, this tall dude. And I'm like, man, I just feel like I know you. And he's like, did you take me when I crashed the airplane? I'm like, oh yeah, that was you. And so, this was probably 8, 9, 10 months later. And he ended up breaking both legs and all this stuff. But that was like the only time I ever saw saw them again. You know, it's just kind of interesting. So,
Good one though. It's nice to see that stuff.
except him and his family like were being very rude to us that night. So it was not like great to see them. They were like, "Put the patient in the helicopter right now." I was like, "You just need to step back. Like we need to like let the med crew do their thing, right? Chill." And you know, just kind of funny. We also had a my only wildlife thing that I ever saw was, I'm tangenting now, so I apologize, but this is this was near the end of my tenure, my 2-year tenure at Flying Air Medical, and we had woken up at 3 a.m, my least favorite thing, and it's just a car crash. We don't know anything about it, and we're going. It's not far from us. We load up, start our orbit, looking at under MVG, and I see the car, and then I see a giant animal in the middle of the road, giant, and we're like 1,000 feet. I'm like, man, guys, what is that? One of the nurses on MVG as well, and she's like, is that a horse? And I'm like, man, it looks like a horse, right? Like that's a big giant animal. And it turned out that this drunk dude was in a Miata, worst possible car to be in, for many reasons. Producer Zach will hate me for saying that. And this cow came out and it flattened this guy. Just completely, like he just hit this cow and it just flattened the Miata. And the cow unfortunately didn't make it. We take the patient and he's like, he's like not doing well. You know, he's like not responsive. Turns out the guy was just so drunk. He was just like passed out. He was totally fine. Like this, 2,000-pound cow crushed him, but somehow he like was fine. And so we ended up taking him and later found out that he was completely cool. So
drunk. I had a deer versus motorcycle.
Oh,
a lot of motorcycle stuff in general, but yeah, it's not pretty when motorcycles hit things.
Yeah, I can imagine. It is kind of the neat part of Flying Air Medical, though, is you get to help people and you get to see some cool things. Yeah. Sometimes you get to see some things that are like, I'm a pilot. I didn't sign up to see that or smell that or hear that,
Well, we landed at a hospital here and I get out to go open up the clamshells in the back and blood is pouring out of the back of the helicopter. I'm like, Jerry, whose blood is this? He's like, oh, it's probably the patient's.
Yeah.
Like, we're pumping blood into him. I'm like, oh my gosh. But my downwash for the 429 had taken that liquid and blown it all over the helipad and back up onto my helicopter.
That's disgusting.
On my windscreen, and I was like, this is a disaster.
Yeah. This looks like a scene out of Dexter.
And you're just trying to like scrub it off with alcohol wipes. You're like, this is going to take forever.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. It's a weird thing because like some people are cut for it. I wasn't sure how I'd kind of respond to seeing some of that stuff. And I think you kind of carpental. I can never say the word. How do you say it? Carpental. That's a hard word to say. You can't say it.
Until it's a kid. And then once it's a kid, if you're not a mud worker.
Yeah, the kids.
At least for me and other pilots, we have a real hard time with that.
Yep. Yeah, I had back-to-back in 1 week. The only 2 kids stuff that I ever had was back-to-back drownings. And that sucks. That was not fun. And yeah, that's the weird part about that job. I wonder, especially if you've done it for a long time, you may see more things. A lot of my friends that I do the volunteer ski patrol with are retired paramedics and medics for like 30 years, and they worked for big agencies. And like, I think that they deal with some stuff. Like, it's funny because on one hand, they're like, they don't like, they could see the most gnarly thing and they don't react. But then you talk to them and they're like, oh yeah, I still have nightmares about this and that and this and that. It's like, oh man, like maybe you should talk to someone. I don't know. It's like, it's a weird career.
It is. I'm so impressed by our nurses and medics. I love the way Classic does this because we're not contracted separately. We don't work for Air Methods and the nurses and medics don't work for another company. We all work under the same umbrella. These are your people. This is your family. So when you make a weather decision, you consider your family, not just the patient, but your crew, that their families, you spend holidays together. Like, these are your people. And so, yeah, when you're going out and doing these decisions, and I don't know, it definitely, it makes you think about it in a different way, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I was lucky that way too. Our air evac was the same, that they're employed by the same company, you work together. And I didn't realize how badass medics and nurses were, actually.
so badass.
I always thought like a nurse was like, they do some stuff in the hospital and do a little bit of this and do a little bit. I had an ungrateful, I was an, I had an, I was a naive lack of respect for nurses because I just didn't understand. And then I started working with them and paramedics too. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys like, we would walk into these little hospitals and the doctor would be, messing up the Lorenzo scope or whatever it is to intubate someone. And they're looking at my paramedic or my nurse like, okay, your turn. It's like, what? What? Like,
they're not normal nurses and paramedics once they get into flight. They have total autonomy. There's not a doctor there to talk to. So they have to take all their skill and their training for trauma and get busy and working it and doing it. And it's really amazing to see like how badass they get and how in charge and focused what they have to do. And, an interfacility flight with them just kicking back, transporting a patient is something different than them working the whole hour trying to keep somebody alive. And you're just flying as fast as you can to make sure that, you're not wasting any time. And
yeah,
so badass that as pilots, I just kind of feel like I'm riding off the coattails of their badassery, being like, at least I get to participate and hold a bag or something like that.
Yeah, you're pretty important. That operation doesn't work very well without you. So I think it, everyone's skill is serving, the purpose, right? And the thing that I always was really impressed with the med crew that I worked with was their commitment to education. Like when we weren't flying, they were trying to get better. Like there was never, they sleep a lot though too, actually. But when they're up, because they work 24-hour shifts. So, I don't blame them for that. But I mean, the constant continual education and challenging each other. And then not to mention the charting. Oh my God, that looks horrible. I am very thankful that I'm not a paramedic or a nurse and don't have to do any of that. But it is a neat part. It's neat to kind of see that. And I really enjoyed my time flying air medical and sounds super cool. Classic sounds like a great company. And, maybe as I continue the podcast, I can, you can connect me with them and we can maybe talk to some other people from Classic and push the brand because it sounds like they're doing pretty cool things. So, Tracy, just like that, we've talked, we've done it. We're here. What's up with Lee? Is she going to come on the podcast?
She's so damn funny. So I talk to her every Friday. I got to call her today, but I talked a couple days ago. She cracks me up. So they just came back down from Alaska. They're in Arizona and she's going to some sort of bell something. I don't even know what it is. And then they were going to go back up to Alaska and come back down for Oshkosh. So she's like a ping pong ball all over the place right now. You just got to get her in one spot and get that interview.
God, I got to get it. All right. Well, maybe you can help advocate. But Tracy, thank you so much. I love your energy. You seem like an awesome person. And I'm glad that I got to know you and I hope that we can stay in touch. Love to come visit. Love to, I'm an outdoors guy. So I love doing.
Here's one of my favorite people, my boss in Alaska, calling me.
Hey, turn your phone off. Turn your phone off, Tracy. This is a real podcast.
It's not my favorite, but I think that's how we step through.
That's awesome. I can imagine that those who have worked with you and work with you now just really enjoy that. It seems like you bring a lot of energy, which is super cool. So thank you, and so cool, and what an awesome story. 29 years old, never thought about flying helicopters. And then wham, bam, thank you, Sam. Here you are now flying a Bell 429 in the Rockies, doing search and rescue, air medical. Previously, you're flying heli skiing, fire, doing a bunch of badass stuff in Alaska. So you started like later than someone like myself, but you've done 10,000 times more. So so cool. Very just stoked to have you on the show, and please keep in touch.
Well, thank you.
To our listeners, what was that?
Oh, no, go ahead.
To the listeners, thanks for continuing to listen. Really appreciate it. And if you, like our friend Bert did, have a recommendation of someone that should be on the podcast, I would love to hear about it. I love chatting with people, love making new friends. And as you can imagine, we produce an episode every single week, and it's a small industry. My network's only so big. So your help would be awesome. You can go to the Helicopter Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and you can shoot us a message there. So thanks again to Bert. Tracy, you're a badass. Keep doing what you're doing. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ollie.
Hey, podcast listeners. My name is Halsey Schider, and I'm the principal broker and owner of Helicopter. Helicopter is a new age, data-driven, helicopter-specific sales brokerage, bringing helicopter listings to new heights. At Helicopter, we utilize digital positioning, paid advertising, and our large network of industry professionals to move your helicopter quickly and efficiently. Unsure the value of your helicopter? Lucky for you, Helicopter offers a complimentary market evaluation. All you have to do is contact the team today. Are you ready to take your helicopter listing from Mayday to payday? Easy. Fill out the contact information below, and a Helicopter pilot agent will reach out shortly. Helicopter. List it, sell it, done.